Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Well, hey, Jeff.
Rudy.
We're back for another DMM download. And we've been talking the last hour.
We always talk for an hour before we even start recording.
Yeah, talking life, talking things of God, talking family, talking our own personal needs in life. And so if you're listening, we want to thank you again for listening. I've talked to a few of you that are listening, and it seems like it's helping. I know it's helpful to me, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this DMM Downloads podcast, is because Jeff has just been getting downloads in the DMM world for years. We've been leaning in together now for several years. And I find it very helpful when Jeff is giving some fresh downloads for me to kind of be thinking about as well. So hopefully you're getting as much benefit as I am, or even better benefits than I am. Today, we're continuing kind of the mini-series, the paradigm shifts, engineering a paradigm shift, not only in churches, established churches, but also within kind of individual households and people. And so today, Jeff had a new download that he wants to talk about regarding form and function. Take it away, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I want to bring in some conversation we had before we started recording. Mm-hmm. We were talking about if we could step back and get a bigger picture, that it seems like we're living in a day and age, in a world, that there's lots of paradigm shifts. Yep. So even though we're leaning into local church or Christianity or how to gospel, that it's only maybe one, and we can't go through all of them. We talked a little bit, I told you, even in regard to some health issues in healthcare, there's with new neurology discoveries, so there's a paradigm shift in the medical community. Mm-hmm. There's a paradigm shift in regard to finances. Rudy, I've been trying to get you to buy Bitcoin. So listeners, if you don't like that, but there is a paradigm shift to digital assets and that whole reality. And so I guess we're just simply saying that maybe God is creating a world in which there are a variety of paradigm shifts. And we need to explore and maybe lean in, because the world that's coming is not the world that has been in many ways. And again, I know in Christianity or church, we look to the past sometimes more than we look to the future. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context for this whole thing of re-engineering or engineering a paradigm shift. So one of the things we've talked about, and we put it in the form of, we talk in the terms of form and function. And what we mean by that, we need to have a paradigm shift from focusing most of our energy on form, which in regard to local church, we'd say it's the organization, it's centralized, its structure, its program or programming. That's what we'd call form. We think there needs to be a paradigm shift to more what we would call function. We think when we look in the Gospels, we look at how Jesus taught and modeled, he was equipping people for function. To do things, not just to keep organization running. So that's kind of the heavy 30,000 foot level. I'm going to let you lean in, and then we can go from there. But does it make sense? We think there needs to be a paradigm shift from so much focus, energy, money, focusing on the form, structure, organization, centralization, to more functioning of the body of Christ in regard to gospel ministry. Does that make sense? And then let's see if we can unpack that and dive a little deeper.
Yeah, I think I'd like you just to kind of go take it to the next level deeper, whatever. I don't know what that really means, but as somebody who's pastored a local church for many years, led staff meetings. And I think I've told you this in the last 4 years, going on 5 years, I went from 90% of my working week being inside the walls of the church, the organized church, organizing the church, to 90% of my work is done outside of the church now in terms of the organized church. Trying to strip away some of the form, if you will. I don't think I had that language till right now, but that's kind of how I can see it. So I kind of know what it looks like to be on a traditional church staff team where you're putting a lot of your emphasis on the form, but maybe drill down a little bit deeper, keep unpacking for us so it'll help us understand.
Yeah, and there's probably, again, all of these subjects we've been talking about, there's several layers down. We just can't do that in the podcast. But I think we've talked about it. I think the functioning is that the body is to function. If you will, if I just look at my own physical body, I just can't look at taking care of the form. I've got to make sure that all the parts are functioning well, if that makes sense. And I think when we look at organization, form or organization, sometimes so much of our time, energy, and effort is how do we keep this organization, this system operating and running well, but that may not be based on really the functioning of the body of Christ. And maybe I'll just pivot here, we've done it before, is we think Jesus gave a really clear blueprint of function and functioning in Ephesians chapter 4. When he ascended on high, left the earth, and what he had done, that when he ascended on high, he gave gifts to the church, which were people, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors and shepherds, pastors and teachers, to equip the saints. So what happens is sometimes leadership is focused on how do we get people into the building, how do we keep people in the building, how do we keep people happy, and we got this building and we got the property and we've got all the staff. And sometimes they're not equipping the saints because they're not functioning because they have to take care of the form. Does that make sense?
It does. I think I'd like to hear you say more about what does it look like to equip it towards function. And maybe, I know we're going to do a different podcast as well on some nuances to this, but do you want to say anything to that? Because you're using the word form, and I'm equating that to staff meetings, budgets, building maintenance, whatever other forms come, small group. I remember I was in charge of small groups for a while. And so then it's like I spend, I don't know how many hours a week writing the curriculum, getting it prepared, training the people. But is that what you mean by form? And then what do you mean by?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. That includes, again, if we're using form meaning structure or organization or centralization. And if you're listening, don't get us wrong. Rudy and I've spent, probably together 80 some years in that form and in the local church, and we love the local church. We're not bashing the local church. We just both recognize that so much time, energy, effort, money goes into keeping the form together that it doesn't allow us the time, energy, effort, money sometimes to do the functioning, not only of us in leadership functioning, but then to equip the rest of the body. If you want to look at Romans 12, or you want to look at, again, Ephesians 4, and these other areas, 1 Corinthians 12, where we're focusing on equipping people to function in the body of Christ in an effective way. Does that make sense?
I think so. So the mini-series is engineering a paradigm shift. And you're saying we do need to look at shifting from form to function. Can you give us maybe a practical illustration of what that shift looks like? There's a myriad of examples. Give us one.
Before I do that, I would take us back. If we look at Jesus as the model, and sometimes, I'm sorry to say, sometimes we don't look at Jesus as the model. We look at Western church or what's gone before us, or form, and just keep that going. I don't see Jesus spending a lot of time, energy, and effort creating the form, sustaining the form, nurturing the form, but he was all about his function. He's always on mission. He was always healing and loving and equipping and discipling. And so I would probably say he's our model. But in all reality, if we're going to kind of paradigm shift, first of all, we've got to recognize there's a need for change. If you don't recognize that, you're not going to move to that. It's kind of like I have an older son that's 10 years plus clean and sober. And in rehab, they tell you, you change only if you want to or if you have to. And you better do it when you want to rather than you have to. They recognize that you want to change. So the recognition for me and in DMM is that the result we got of focusing so much on form, we didn't make disciples who made disciples who made disciples that began to really step into lost world using marketplace functioning of the body of Christ, which created opportunity to see lost people come to know and follow Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so marketplace ministry. So the point being is you've got to first want to change, and then how do you change? Then you've got to begin to say, okay, how do we move from just thinking all the time about how keeping the form together, and how are we really training and equipping and nurturing and empowering, deploying the functions of the body of Christ, not only those of us in leadership in local church, but again, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, where are people functioning like that in the marketplace? Using the gift of mercy or the gift of leadership or all the different gifts we could say, 1 Corinthians 12 or Romans 12, where are those functioning not inside the church but outside the church in lostness? How are we doing? And so I think there has to become awareness. We want to change, but then we've got to begin to figure out how do we not focus so much time on form, but we really do develop function.
Yeah. And if we do that, Jeff, I can hear my own brain starting to wrestle with that idea, thinking, well, then what, Jeff? Like, what, does the form just evaporate? Like, what does that mean? Like, because we're all so, for a lot of us that are listening, we're can I use the word entrenched in the form? I mean, it's kind of, it's baked in.
Yeah, I think it is baked in. I think it takes, for me, Rudy, and you maybe, there has to take some evaluation as what are we producing? Again, we've talked about this before. Are we producing consumers or are we producing contributors? Did Jesus just want us to get everybody in centralized and go through Sunday morning for an hour and a half and that's it? Or was that we were to be being trained and equipped to go into lostness? So what do we do with that? The reality is we're going to have to be fairly courageous to say that we're not going to be able to provide the form, keep the organization going in the same way. It's like I just got a call from a good friend who his wife now has stage 4 cancer. Well, 2 weeks ago, they were operating in a different model. Life was great, but obviously they're having to change their form because something's happened. And so we think that it's better to begin to say we think there needs to be not so much just all time, energy, and effort on keeping the form going, but slowly, small steps, but designated steps, thought through steps to say, hey, how are we training and equipping? How are we functioning as leadership in a biblical model? And how are we equipping others to function?
Yeah. So before I give you maybe a last word on this, you can be thinking if there's a last word you have. I want to say, I think one of the things we're trying to offer through DMM NOCO is, we've talked about this, we want to bring awareness to disciple making movement for Northern Colorado specifically, but anybody listening. We want to offer training opportunities, which we've talked about on this podcast before. Hop on our website to find out more. But we also want to offer coaching. We do offer coaching. And that causes, this conversation today causes me to think more about coaching. If you're listening and the paradigm shift is in your heart and your mind, and you're thinking about it like we've been thinking about it, and you're starting to engineer a paradigm shift, whether it be in your own personal life and ministry or your church. I think coaching becomes paramount, because I need you, Jeff, for example, to look into my life and ministry and say, Rudy, how's that going? How is the shift going for you? And where do you need help or support or just encouragement or whatever it may be? I don't know. I at least want to plug that and say, I think within DMM NOCO, we offer coaching for paradigm shifts, for example. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you hop on our website, get in contact with us, and we can talk to you about these things, especially if you're in Northern Colorado. We want to engage with you on how do you actually shift, as we're talking more the 30,000 foot level. Let's bring it down to the ground level and start working on these things. One last word from you, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I think it's always difficult when we're doing a podcast, and what are we, 32 or 33 ones in now? Is that, are we talking to individuals? Are we talking to local churches? Are we talking to church staffs? So it's a little bit, you don't always know your audience, so we want to be careful there. But we want to say, if you're maybe in leadership of a local church, we're not bashing you. We're not saying you're doing anything wrong. We're saying that we believe there needs to be some awareness that sometimes we've got so consumed and captured in keeping the form, the structure of the organization going, that we don't have the time, energy, effort, or focus on really being able to function differently. And just the caveat to that is, I am now on staff at a local church.
Yeah, good point.
We're not trying to dismantle the form, the organization, the structure, but we are trying to introduce some new ways to think differently, to act differently, to operate differently. So we move from just being consumed on the form to learning how to really function differently in days to come.
Thanks, Jeff, for that download. That's helpful. Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NOCO, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a Self-Paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through His Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.